Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. I am glad to have the opportunity to speak today from the backbenches on this important debate. The matter that we discuss is of fundamental import. It is a serious matter. It is something that has an impact on many, many thousands of businesses, in particular right throughout Northern Ireland. It is one that affects trade, our economy, but also the very democratic and constitutional underpinnings of Northern Ireland and our sovereign United Kingdom. I know across the chamber today there will be people from different perspectives. For some, this will have ideological and constitutional issues, but for all others, we ought to listen to the real and practical trade and economic issues facing businesses in each and every one of your constituencies in relation to Articles 5 to 10. It is, of course, important to remember that this vote today does not and will not revoke the protocol. What we are debating is in relation to Articles 5 to 10, and we've had some exploration of that already. And the reality is that those provisions are causing serious issues. The DUP's commitment is clear, and it's clear across all three of those issues: ideological, constitutional, and in relation to the practical trade implications. Building on the progress to date, the DUP will continue to fight to fully restore Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. This means removing the application of EU law and any internal barrier it creates. The DUP will continue to argue the case for full primacy of the United Kingdom internal market, and the DUP will continue to reject the undermining of its integrity. That is why we have no hesitation today in voting against their continued application, and therefore triggering the review. The tale of this matter is both a long and a sad one, and it is not possible to talk to the matter that we are considering today without some consideration of how we got here. There have been disappointments and letdowns. There have been theatrics and dramatics. There has been buffoonery and blustering, but of course more about Boris later on. But also the continuous, and I have to say, I have seen it repeated here today, the continuous dismissing and demeaning of serious concerns. We cannot and ought not to sneer at each other across this chamber when we are raising constitutional and ideological and real concerns that we genuinely feel. That has been the hallmark of the last 8 years. And the lessons of the last 8 years must be learned. It cannot be repeated. Issues must be addressed and promises kept. I'm just going to make a little bit more progress before. But make no mistake, the mishandling of Brexit and the subsequent protocol was an unparalleled act of constitutional self-harm by the UK government. No government should have ever signed up to such terms. An agreement that damaged the very fabric of our constitutional settlement and shattered the integrity of the UK internal market. The strength of an internal market matters. The integrity of a single market is protected for good reason. Reasons of fairness, of strength, of creating optimal trading and internal relationships. And this is precisely why the integrity of the EU single market would never have been on the negotiating table during the Brexit negotiations. The integrity of the UK's should not have been, yet it was. And we are still dealing today in 2024 because of the botched nature of those discussions, because the very integrity of our internal market, our single market in this United Kingdom, was placed on the negotiated table and negotiated away and damaged. From the ineptitude of Theresa May and her team to the blundering of blustering Boris, this has been a catalogue of mistakes and errors and own goals. This was a botched Brexit. Let us be very clear, this was not the inevitable result of Brexit. This is the result of a botched Brexit. And they were warned. We warned them. I was there in Parliament raising my voice against what was proposed time and time again. There were many different ways to bring about the result of a democratic referendum across this United Kingdom. And no matter what you think about this, what people think about this across this chamber, it was a democratic vote. And I can tell you this, if it came to a vote around the reunification of Ireland, and that vote passed but was ignored, the very same people fighting against the democratic outcome of the Brexit referendum would be howling if that was even a suggestion of that being ignored. So therefore, whenever the referendum happened, the DUP rightly in my view, regardless of the view on Brexit, and there were a range of views on Brexit within Unionism, within the DUP, but regardless of your view on Brexit, the DUP took a position which is, and was, that the result of the democratic referendum should rightly be implemented. But we also made clear that it ought to be implemented in a way which reduced and produced a good Brexit deal. That did not happen. It was a botched Brexit that started with key mistakes of timetable agreements for negotiations, creating pinch points to pressure the UK, to early concessions removing important negotiation flexibilities by Theresa May and her team. At every stage, we have heard the same thing, time and time again. This is the best deal you're going to get. And when Theresa May came up with her backstop, the very same thing was said. But we said the backstop was never a backup. Yet too many did not want to see. The backstop deal, which would have kept Northern Ireland formally and officially within the EU customs union, was always going to be the final outcome. It was never going to be the backup. A blind man on a galloping horse could have seen that. And yet there was collective gaslighting going on. Oh, no, the backstop is never going to come in. Something else will be negotiated. But of course, the backstop deal meant that nothing to replace it could be put in place unilaterally. The replacement of the backstop had to be agreed by the EU in the terms of that agreement. It was always going to be the outcome. Wall to wall, all declared that the negotiation was completed. As we raised concerns about the backstop provisions, we were told it was not going to change. Wails from Remainers at all sides of the House of Commons, from party leaders in Northern Ireland, the SDLP, Alliance, Sinn Féin, the Lib Dems and Labour, from the backbenchers of the Conservative Party, from worthy academics to practically all media commentators. They said the backstop is not going to change. And then came Boris. And boom, the backstop is reopened. Great news, or it should have been. Boris blew it. The UK government, the negotiators, the Prime Minister's team were, it would appear, woefully unprepared. And what we are dealing with today, what we are trying to deal with on a week by week, what the committee looks like in terms of all of these unexpected, unforeseen, unpredicted issues, having real issues for businesses in every single constituency, that is what we are dealing with today because of that original backstop leading to the protocol, that original agreement that was made. What we are dealing with today leads directly from Boris's botched Brexit deal. And it isn't working. A wee wander through the garden with Leo Varadkar, and Boris signed up to the protocol and caused immeasurable damage. A protocol that created a hard border down the Irish Sea and shattered our UK internal market. We warned Boris Johnson about this, but he would not heed the warnings. And I have to say, I am absolutely sick of the revisionism, the scoffing. Why did the DUP negotiate with Boris Johnson? Well, because he was the Prime Minister. He was the person leading the negotiations with the EU. He was the person with the ability to put onto the table what needed to be done. He was the person that was going to sign his name to the bottom of that document and that agreement. That is why we did our best. That is why we endeavoured to ensure a good Brexit. I will give way.
Member for giving way. We all had to engage with Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. I think that was the inevitable consequence of his position. We didn't all, though, champion him when he was running for Prime Minister. We didn't all invite him to our party conferences and cosy up to him. So I think some responsibility in all of this needs to be taken for the choices that the DUP made.
Thank the member for her contribution. I would point out that actually we don't have, the Conservative Party is not a sister party of the DUP, but the Lib Dems are a sister party of the Alliance Party, Labour are a sister party of the SDLP. At various times over the last number of years, you have cosied up to many different people who have then went on to take part in votes and issues and make decisions that you disagree with. And ditto in terms of what is happening with the Labour government at the moment. That is the reality. But the truth is, we were doing our best for the people of Northern Ireland by making our point at every opportunity to the Prime Minister. We invited the Prime Minister to our party conference because it was a great opportunity to make the points directly to the Prime Minister. Did he listen? No. Did he listen to the warnings? No. But that is a shame on him. It is not a shame on us for doing what we could do to fight for the people of Northern Ireland to get the best deal and the best Brexit outcome. As I said, we warned Boris Johnson about this and he did not heed. And I think everyone in this chamber could tell I am no fan of Boris Johnson. But the protocol also brought us this vote. It meant, and does mean, for the very first time since 1998, for the very first time since the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, a key decision, a key vote in this House that will affect everyone in Northern Ireland will not require cross-community support within the Assembly. Now, the reality is that is a fundamental change. And the only reason that any of you across this chamber are not howling about this is because it is not in your interest on this particular issue. Because I would reiterate, this is the first and only key decision that this House will be voting on that absolutely tears asunder the key values and principles that other parties in this chamber championed around the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I will give way.
I think I've and others have dealt with the point around cross-community voting, but she acknowledged that prior to this debate, we voted on carbon budgets, which most people would say are a pretty big deal. They're such a big deal that your party forced a division and voted against them. That's I might disagree with that, but that's entirely the perspective and right of the DUP. That was not decided by a cross-community vote, and that's it was significant enough for there to be a division. So would she accept that cross-community voting is not a commonplace thing that happens on every single important vote in this chamber?
I hesitate to get into the detail of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the Northern Ireland Act of 1998, but I'm sure the member is fully aware that all decisions indeed, of this House are subject to a petition of concern. And ergo, a cross-community vote could have been triggered in relation to that vote, as it does with every single vote. And I'm afraid if the member from the SDLP does not recall that, I would suggest to him that he goes back and reads again the Northern Ireland Act of 1998, because this is the only vote, the only key vote in this House since 1998, since the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that will not be subject to the ability to trigger a cross-community vote. And the values of that agreement, we were told by those who wrote it and put it together, was about consensus and inclusion. But it's only consensus and inclusion if it is a matter that is important to you, but not if it's a matter that is important to unionism. It is absolutely appalling. This, quite frankly, is a rigged vote. The message being sent from this chamber today is of a vote that does not and has not gone through the normal procedures which underpin these very institutions. The protections promised in early October of 2019 by Boris Johnson, off, by the way, in the proposal that he had in early October 2019, was of a cross-community vote in the Assembly. And that disappeared after his little chat with Leo Varadkar. It fundamentally changed what was on the table. And immediately the DUP pointed it out, highlighted it and opposed it. We have opposed these provisions from the very start. And over the years since, we have worked tirelessly to undo the incredible harm caused by that protocol agreement. The DUP has fought against the damaging protocol at every stage. We opposed it to the Prime Minister. We voted against it in the House of Commons. We voted against it in the House of Lords. We publicly and legally challenged the provision. Our opposition could not be more clear. We could see the damage it would cause, even if others, including many in this place today, refused to see it. But this is the reality. It wasn't just the harm done by the then Prime Minister, but by an impatient House of Commons eager to just get it all done with, to vote it all through. And yes, our UK Parliament voted for it. And we can't get away from that. And it is something that day in and day out grieves me, because that is where this is based. I can criticise the European Union, I can criticise the Irish government for interventions, I could criticise, and I will in due course, criticise others for rigorous implementation. But I also criticise my own sovereign parliament for not caring about the constitutional implications of this. And when we got to court, why was this defeated? This was defeated in terms of the challenge because the sovereign parliament voted for it. And I would appeal once again for that parliament to have a rethink. And that is why I agree absolutely with many that have already spoken from this side of the House today to say, wouldn't it be so good for us to send that message to the UK government, to the EU, that these provisions set down in Articles 5 to 10 are causing real difficulties for businesses. It's creating a limited choice for consumers. It is causing issues for supplies and suppliers. There is no way of getting around that. And while there is always on the promises and promises of a possible benefit down the line in terms of so-called dual market access, we have confirmation that that has not yet been realised, if it ever will. So we have compromised real practical issues for our economy and for our businesses on the promise of something that is simply not materialised. This is and remains unacceptable. And while others once again pontificated that the negotiations were over, because of course the protocol was only a certain point in all of this, and we were told once again there will be no changes on the protocol. Forget all about it. The negotiation is over. By so many of you sitting in this House today, once again you said, don't waste any time in relation to that. But we could see the danger in it. We could see the many, many, many issues. Even access to human medicines had not been resolved. The literally thousands of products that were going to be stopped coming into Northern Ireland. And the only reason that citizens right throughout Northern Ireland did not see it themselves was because of the grace periods. But the rigorous implementation of the protocol would have ended those grace periods. It would have brought all of that in. It would have caused huge disruption for every supermarket, for every corner shop, for every takeaway, every restaurant, every small business owner. And that had to be dealt with. And we went to the UK government, and we went to the EU, and we tried to renegotiate what was the damage done in that terrible protocol. And when we were trying to do that, there was restoration of the Assembly. We were going through COVID. Every time we made a little bit of progress, what happened? We were undermined. And I'm absolutely unashamed by saying very clearly to this House, we were undermined by some of you sitting around here in the SDLP, in the Alliance Party, in Sinn Féin, running while we were under live negotiations to try to get the worst parts of the protocol changed. You were running to the European Union. You were running down the road to Dublin, and you were asking them to rigorously implement something that would have caused huge, huge harm to Northern Ireland. That is shameful. That is shameful. And it led directly to the point where we had no other choice but to step forward and to stand up and to force people back around the table. Did we want to do it? No. Were we reluctant to do it? Absolutely. But we had to force people back towards that negotiating table, and what was produced from that process? The Windsor Framework. And the reality is that the DUP took the abuse, we were attacked by our actions, but it is undeniable that the Windsor Framework is a significant move forward. Thousands and thousands of goods being removed from being impacted by the protocol. The internal movement around supermarkets, restaurants, takeaways, cafes, all being able to access supplies from GB. It gave the UK a unilateral veto on amended and new EU legislation for the first time. Something we had asked for during the protocol. something we had highlighted as a concern to both Theresa May and Boris Johnson. But that was achieved by Rishi Sunak. It addressed a number of issues, but there was more to be done. And that is why we did not go back in on the basis of that. It did not resolve everything, and we made that clear at the time. It is an improvement. But unfortunately for unionism, we had to take a hard decision. The DUP, as leaders of unionism, had to take a hard decision. We care about the people of Northern Ireland. We care about health. We care about education. And yes, we care about the economy. We want the Northern Ireland economy to do well, and that must mean getting the best deal that we could get. And that's why we didn't accept the Windsor Framework. We recognise the progress made. But as we moved on, we still fought on. We fought for the best possible deal that we could get. And in safeguarding the Union, it was and represented steps forward. But again, it is not perfect. And we said that very clearly at the time. And I so rarely get the opportunity to speak about it right now. But my goodness, I've had to sit there and listen time and time and time again of people telling us what we said about safeguarding the Union. What we said was that it was progress. It was progress, but there was more to be done. There were still problems with it. There were still issues with it, but it represented real progress, building on the progress of the Windsor Framework. And that is why we are where we are. There have been improvements. I speak to businesses all of the time, and I know that many of you do too. But there's also been so many unexpected problems. We might as well rename the committee, the Windsor Framework Scrutiny Committee, the Whack-a-Mole Committee. Because quite frankly, you're dealing with issues as they keep popping up, left, right and centre, unexpected, unpredicted. Suddenly they come from nowhere. The UK government didn't see it, the EU didn't see it. And I would only appeal to everyone in this chamber today that under these provisions, because its origin is back in a deeply flawed protocol document botched by Boris Johnson and his government, that these issues will continue to flow. And they continue to flow because of Articles 5 to 10. And the issue that we have always said, because I've heard this already in the chamber today, is in what's the alternative? Well, I'll tell you what the alternative is. It's a logical system based on the assessment of risk, on proportionality, looking at issues such as mutual enforcement, looking at a mutual recognition of standards. Because I'll tell you this, yeah, I will indeed.
Place of guidance for the member. You can see our particular thing. It's still on our website, the Ulster Unionist Party, that mentions all those things. But I'd be delighted if everybody could read it, because that is the method of going ahead. Thank you.
Contribution. I do believe that the Ulster Unionist Party were, of course, talking to the same people about the mutual enforcement concept at the same time. It's an issue that we made representations to the UK government about at the same time. And you will have seen many contributions of our members in the House of Lords and in the House of Commons on this issue as well. Because, of course, there are many, many different ways to do the same thing. And we must not forget that at this moment in time, the UK is fully aligned and signed up to the same EU standards as the EU. We are checking from one area with the same standards into another area with exactly the same standards. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is totally disproportionate. It is not based on risk, and it is bureaucracy gone mad. I'm going to give way to John first.
Thank you for giving way and a very passionate articulation of facts. But would the member agree with me that whilst there is sneers in relation to mutual enforcement from some of the benches, the genesis of the suggestion actually came from the EU itself?
I thank the member for his contribution, but of course it comes back to the very fundamental issue of Brexit. The UK voluntarily joined a club, and that club was the European Union. And the terms of joining voluntarily, of course, was that you could voluntarily leave at any time. And yet, my goodness, the wails of outrage whenever the people of the United Kingdom democratically decided to leave. But the absolutely mature thing to do, the thing that you would have expected from sovereign governments and international bodies, was to accept the result and the outcome of a democratic vote and try mutually to work together for the best possible deal. And my goodness, I don't think it is beyond the wit of man and woman to be able to have two sovereign places working together side by side as good neighbours that can trade with each other. Both of them wanting high standards of food product and manufactured goods for their people on the basis of an assessment of risk, proportionality and mutual recognition of our high standards. That's what ought to have happened, but it did not. But Northern Ireland is paying the price of a botched Brexit. We'll give way.
I think it's a sign that she's willing to have a serious debate, but could she give me an example of any other jurisdictions in the world that operate the kind of mutual enforcement she would like to see operate on the island of Ireland?
Look, there are numerous relationships between trading partners that it does not look or feel like the European Union situation. And we always need to get away from this fundamental point. At the moment, EU goods can flow freely into Great Britain because Great Britain is not exercising a protectionist system. The reason GB goods cannot flow freely into the European Union is because the European Union notoriously, globally, operates a protectionist system. These are political choices. It is the choice of the European Union, a political choice if they want to lift customs in terms of Northern Ireland. It is a political choice if they want to do checks or not checks. They have broken the mould, so they keep telling us, in terms of the Windsor Framework, and they can continue to break the mould. But they will only do so if we send a clear message to say we need to strive for better. We need to strive for something that will work. It is a crazy system if we are to look for the next 4 years of constantly trying to fight against issues as they keep popping up and popping up. And yes, we do in the short term need that reactivity, the reaction of both the UK government and the EU, that as these issues emerge, for them to be dealt with. But better still if we have a system that doesn't result in these types of issues continuously coming up unexpectedly and without prediction. But I do want to move on to the outstanding commitments of the Safeguarding the Union agreement and policy. And I would appeal to the Labour Party that there are a number of outstanding commitments. The Labour Party voted for and supported both the Windsor Framework and the Safeguarding the Union paper. They undertook to fulfil the promises, acknowledging that the then government who did the deal was in its dying days. This was the basis for restoration. The Labour government must step up and deliver what was promised, what they voted for, what they said they would do. Where are we with the implementation and delivery today? What is the government's position on eradicating routine checks within the UK's internal market system? Something they promised to do. That is what Labour voted for. And we're facing into this Friday in terms of the general products regulations coming in. That's going to have a real impact. I'm getting contacted by people all of the time who are going to have issues with supplies. The Labour government promised, along with the then government, that they would ensure the free flow of internal UK goods across the United Kingdom without checks. Let's see that happen. On partials and customs, another commitment made back in February and supported by Labour. And let's make very clear, we would not have moved forward only these were supported and voted on by Labour, because it was inevitable there was going to be an election. And therefore it was going to be a Labour government that had to stand by those agreements in terms of what needed to be done. It was to be implemented by October of this year, but they have delayed it. Now, they have promised that they will do it, but those are promises that need to be fulfilled. UK-wide labelling has been ditched. And again, there was a good reason for that. It was to prevent the withdrawal of suppliers to the NI market. And it wouldn't have brought with it any significant cost, but it would have helped protect the UK internal market. More must be done. We also need urgent action and response when things emerge. I've already mentioned the GPSR. I took the opportunity to raise this directly with the Prime Minister, with the CDL, with the ministers responsible for EU relationships. But make no mistake, it is an excellent example of something that emerges, despite the fact that in February of 2023, the UK extended agreement to alignment with EU standards. So EU standards continue, and despite of that, this coming in under regulations agreed prior to the protocol and Windsor Framework arrangements will have a real impact on the UK internal market, and particularly for Northern Ireland. The reality is, negotiations will take years in relation to SPS. Negotiations are not going to produce the answers to any of these issues in the next number of months. And therefore, we should be sending a clear message from this place. Do better. Go back and try to achieve more. You have said and made a promise to the people of Northern Ireland, and indeed to the people of the United Kingdom, that there would be a free flow of trade across our United Kingdom. The integrity of our single market matters. It matters to us, but it should always matter to businesses, to you, regardless of your ideological and constitutional background. In summary, the Northern Ireland Protocol has been imposed upon us without any support from Unionist representatives. It is doing harm. And we stand here today even though that this process has been delegitimised, because we are not willing to complete this disenfranchisement of our constituents by not participating in today's debate and vote. However, by participating and by voting against it, we ensure that no one, whether they are in Westminster or within the European Union, can claim that we are disinterested or absent. Today, we are making it clear that we oppose the ongoing application of the framework, which is causing so much difficulty to businesses. I believe today provides that opportunity for unionism to unite and to send a very clear message to London and to the EU. We will vote against the continued application of the current arrangements, and we would encourage all members of the Assembly to do so, and those who value democratic decision-making in this place to join us. Thank you.
I call Andrew Moore.